Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 4, we will, and we our members are first there is Karisma, second there is me Yuli, third there is Jalu, and fourth there is Juliani. Here we would like to present about the literature value of love and sacrifice of the story of the birthmark. Before we going to go deeper about the theory of love and sacrifice of the birthmark story, I would like to give a little review about the story. Here the story of um, the Birthmark by Nathaniel Hawthorne, uh, which is which is out of 18th, and the story is about a couple who is Limer and his wife Georgiana. Limer here was a scientist, and Georgiana is a housewife who loves her husband so much. This story told us that Georgiana, who had a birthmark on her cheeks, as became the problem of this story. Georgiana thought that her birthmark was a charm, but her husband, Limer, thought that her birthmark was completely an imperfection of her body. So Limer wants to remove her birthmark by make her as an experimental object, as he was a scientist. Okay, next. Definition. Love is not just a feeling, it's a commitment, and above all, a sacrifice. So love itself is a feeling which is need a sacrifice in it. So love and sacrifice is interrelatable. Okay, next. Definition of love and sacrifice. In love, it is necessary to distinguish between sacrifice and giving. Because since giving is completely willing, then there is no desire for reward. And sacrifice is compelling. So it must be to preserve something or obtain something. For example, sacrificing school and career to get a certain love. However, if the sacrifice is not rewarded, then the person who sacrificed will have feeling of loss, frustration, and even resentment. Okay, the next presentation will continue by my friend, Juliani.
Okay, the next I will explain about some theories about love and sacrifice. Next. Some theories about love and sacrifice. First, sacrifice comes naturally when we love someone and build a better relationship. The theories by Van Lynch et al. Lynch also mentioned that sometimes it is easy for close partners to coordinate their behavior in such a manner as to achieve good outcomes. When two individuals' interests align, achievement of desirable outcomes is a relatively simple matter. Unfortunately, partners' interests sometimes are at odds. What is good for one partner is not good for the other. When partners' preferences do not correspond, one or both individual may find it necessary or desirable to sacrifice their needs for their partner's needs. Dictionary definition of sacrifice include the following, like giving up one thing for another, surrender to gain some other object, devote with loss, or foregoing something value for the sake of something having a more pressing claim. And next, to love someone is a way of helping them to become as good as possible by Zalek 2018. Sacrifice has from always been an integral part of human life. In the Zalek article, he talks about sacrifice to good. So he mentioned that sacrifice is love for good. Next, based on Lewis and Nini and Lennon, love shapes human personality and action that occur from their birth until their death. Lewis et al. Mentioned that can feel love since we were a child. We feel our parents' love. That's why love will be part of human life since child until death. Next. And the next, the altruistic component of love. A willingness to sacrifice self-interest to advance the well-being of others by behavior and care. And the last one is sacrifice is the kind of choice that comes over the radical embodiment experienced by living object by Birthmark 2002. And next will be explained by my friend.
Okay, next please. All right, so thank you for my friends for the chance. And the next one, after we know about the story of the birthmarks, that it is written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and we know the definition of the love and the sacrifice as the main theme of this short story. And now we will analyze about the theory of the psychology that appear in this kind of short story. This short story actually bring the two main themes. There are love and sacrifice. Those two themes have their own theory, have their own theory that it is related, especially in the psychological fields. Now, the first one, I will analyze about the theory of love, and its relation with the part of the story. Next, please. Okay, the first theory is the altruistic component of love. For example, a willingness to sacrifice self-interest to advance the well-being for others. It means that this theory believes that love needs sacrifice. When you love someone, when you love something, when you interest of something that you love too much, that you like too much, so you sacrifice anything. It is the human natural behavior until for a long time ago, especially in this kind of short story. So the Birthmark story actually perform or show about this kind of humans behavior, that when humans is loving someone, when human is loving something, and has the big desire of anything, of the thing, so they sacrifice, they do anything, especially to diminish their own self-interest, their own ego, to advance of the well-being for others. For example, like this, we know that there is a story that is two boys, two men, they are a boy and a girl, and then the boy is a bad boy, and then the girl is a good girl. So when the bad boy is loving to the good girl, so the bad boy wants to shape and change himself to be the good, and it is a trait of the good girl that this boy loves too much. So it is same with this case of the Birthmark story. This theory which tells us that love is a willingness to sacrifice one's self-interest to give happiness or satisfactions to others, also did by Georgiana. Here, in the Birthmark story, Georgiana sacrificed her self-interest toward her birthmark, as she thought it was charm to be removed by her loved one, it is her husband, Aylmer, in order to fulfill his husband's satisfactions of science. It means that Georgiana, in the story, that Georgiana have the birthmark on her cheek, but Georgiana feel confident. She feel okay. I have this birthmark because it is appear since I was born, and I'm okay. I'm fit on it. I feel confident on it. So it is actually the actualization of the self-love that I will explain next. And because Georgiana position is the wife of Aylmer, the Aylmer itself is the scientist. So the Georgiana have the big willingness to sacrifice herself, to sacrifice what she interests, especially about her experience. So it means that Georgiana doing her sacrifice to advance of the well-being others. So it means that Georgiana sacrificed her own interests, to make her husband satisfied, and especially to fulfill his ambition of science. Next, please. All right, this is number 2. The second theory. There's one theory. The next theory fell about based on Louis, Amini, and Lennon. This theory, it is conducted in 2004. Love shapes human personality and action that occur from their birth until their death. The theory of love by Louis, Amini, and Lennon also reflected by the characters of Georgiana and Aylmer from the Birthmark story. The first one, because of Georgiana was raised by the idea that the birthmark was a charm in which her ex-lover also said so, she loved herself although she had a birthmark. Now, although the society around Georgiana curse about this birthmark, they really hate about the existence of the birthmark in Georgiana cheeks, but Georgiana feel confidence. She has a big self-esteem and then she has the big love of herself. The big love means that she appreciates herself too much, because she thinks that although she has a birthmark on her cheek, but she feels grateful, especially for God, to make herself on that kind of situation. She feel relaxed, she feel appreciated, and she feel comfortable about this kind of condition. Now, the theory, it is related, it is appear in the part of short story that means, no, indeed, said she, it's smiling. But perceiving the seriousness of this manner, she blushed deeply. To tell you the truth, it has been so often called a charm that I was simple enough to imagine it might be so. This is the evidence of this theory. And the second one, due to science, was the thing that Elmer obsesses with before he married Georgiana. Elmer's love was still beyond his love to his wife until he could make his wife as an experimental object, and then as a result, she passed away. When Elmer have the big love, the big desire in science, so because of his love of science, he wants to become the great scientist, make the great experiments, becomes the proven himself as the big scientist by making the big experiment too. So he thinks that to remove his wife's birthmark, the society will acknowledge himself, will acknowledge him to become the great scientist of the year. By this kind of experiment too, he willing to sacrifice his own wife. Actually, Elmer, as the husband of Georgiana, has the big love to her. As the husband, as the good husband, Elmer actually loved her wife. Because his love of science is bigger than his love to Georgiana. So this experiment is go on. It's go ahead and makes Georgiana sacrifice herself to join this kind of experiment. And then as a result, Georgiana passed away. So this theory, this part of the story will prove about the kind of theory by Louis, Amine, and Len. Next, please. All right, it is the theory number 3. Third theory, to love someone is way of helping them to become as good as possible. It is the theory by Zalek from his research in 2018. Love of theory by Zalek, which said that to love someone is a way to help them to become as good as possible. It is also shown in the Birthmark story. This value of love was implicitly shown by the character of Georgiana, Elmer's wife. Here, Georgiana proved her love by willing to be an experimental material for her husband to remove her birthmark until, as a result, she passed away. Because she loved him, she also cared him. She cannot express her pity on her husband's sadness because he cannot actualize, he cannot make and create the biggest experiment. So when the Elmer is very sad because of this experiment, Georgiana willing to sacrifice herself, especially to remove the birthmark. So in this case, she wanted to break his husband blindly ambition of science to prove that not all things could be done and rational by science. Georgiana also wanted to make her husband realize that his love of science, which was beyond his love to his wife, could not make him live happily. So Georgiana wants to make her husband change, and her husband realized that the big ambition of everything, especially the big ambition of science, could be dangerous for Elmer first, and then could be dangerous for her relationship as the marriage people. So by the death of Georgiana as an experimental science material, Elmer, the husband, lived in loneliness while realizing how love of his wife could help him felt warm when she was around. So the big feeling of love by Georgiana can realize the Elmer about the dangerous of and the harmful effect of the big ambition, especially in science and anything. So the big ambition could be dangerous for everything, especially for your spouse, for your relationship, and for other people, and for yourself too. So this is the power of love that can change the personality of the human. And then there are the theory of the sacrifice that will be explained by my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Jalu. Okay. Hello. Could you please change? Okay. Thank you. Okay. The next one is after we discuss about the love analysis, now it's time for us to discuss the sacrifice from some theories that have been mentioned in the literature. Here is the first theory. According to Isabel M. Andres Cueva, Margarita Carretero Gonzalez, and Laura Torres Zuniga in The Name of Love. As we read the story of the Birthmark by Nathaniel Hawthorne, it seemed that the story used kind of individual sacrifice, which is mentioned by the literature of In the Name of Love. A roundtable discussion on some literary justification for sacrifice. Individual sacrifice here means that someone sacrifices her or himself for a greater good or community. In the story of the Birthmark, we saw that Georgiana sacrificed herself due to she wanted to break the ego of her husband, Alimer. Georgiana wanted to show him that not everything could be done by science. She also wanted to point out that Alimer's sense of perfection as a scientist could not make his life happily because he had lost his lover by making her as an experimental material for his science experiment. So we know that from the story, Georgiana become the Alimer experimental object. And the next one is the theory from Friedenberg 2002 stated sacrifice is the kind of choice that triumphs over the radical embodiment experienced by living objects. The theory from Friedenberg 2002, which stated about sacrifice, was still interrelated with the story of the Birthmark by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This theory could be seen from the characters of Alimer, who loved science so much, and Georgiana, who loved her husband Alimer. Alimer, who had obsessed by science, wanted to remove his wife Birthmark with scientific experiment, and Georgiana, who loved her husband, was willing to sacrifice herself as an experimental object. Here, Alimer's ego won toward Georgiana's love for her husband, in which she was willing to be the one who sacrificed. And the next one is the theory sacrifice comes naturally when we love someone and build a better relationship. The theory from Van Lang et al. 1997. The theory of sacrifice by Lang, 1997, represented by the character of Georgiana. At first, when Alimer asked Georgiana to sacrifice herself as an experimental object to remove her birthmark, she was declining. She said, This is the evidence from the Birthmark story. No, indeed, said she, smiling, but perceiving the seriousness of his manner, she blushed deeply. To tell you the truth, it has been so often called a charm that I was simple enough to imagine it might be so. She also said, shocks you. You can love what shocks you. At the beginning of the story, the Georgiana uh, didn't agree to remove her birthmark in her left cheek, But as the time went by, Georgiana was willing to receive Alina's offers because she thought of the relationship so that her husband would love her more. And this is the evidence that we can find in the Birthmark story. If there be the remotest possibility of it, continued Georgiana, let the attempt be made at whatever takes. Danger is nothing to me, for life, while this hateful mark makes me the object of your horror and disgust. Life is a burden which I would fling down with joy. Either remove this dreadful hand or take my wretched life. You have deep science. All the world bears witness of it. You have achieved great wonders. Can you remove this little mark which I cover with the tips of two small fingers? Is this beyond your power? For the sake of your own peace and to save your poor wife from madness. Okay, that's all. That's all for this session. Thank you for joining our presentation.